Part of being a child is having fun, but some children have to experience emotional and physical situations that are not fun. Abuse and neglect should not be part of anyone's childhood. Rachel dreads bedtime every night. Several times a week, her mother's boyfriend comes into her room and fondles her underneath her pajamas while she tries to pretend she is asleep. Tommy has bruises that weren't caused by your typical rough and tumble playing. His bruises are from being disciplined by his father for misbehavior. But how would anyone know? How could anyone help children like Rachel and Tommy?
As a mandated reporter or a concerned person in the community, you can call the Orange County Child Abuse Registry to report any situation where you suspect a child is being abused. The Child Abuse Registry, sometimes called the Hotline in other counties, handles suspected child abuse and neglect phone calls. Social workers experienced with child abuse and child neglect answer the calls.
You say you saw the child's father shaking him and striking him across the face? When did this occur?
Well, it happened when he picked him up and they were getting into the car. I work here at the after-school child care program. I'm concerned about Tommy. It seems like he's got a new bruise all the time. But when I ask him how things are at home, he says fine.
The Child Abuse Registry social worker will decide if and when to send a social worker out to investigate the situation.
These are the most common kinds of situations that are reported to the Child Abuse Registry in Orange County. A child may be experiencing more than one type of abuse at the same time.
Physical abuse is any act that results in a non-accidental physical injury.
Indicators of physical abuse are bruises, cuts, burns, or swelling that were not caused by accident. Belt buckle marks, handprints, bite marks, and pinches that are inflicted, and any injury unusual for a specific age group. A history of previous or recurrent injuries is something to report. Every child reacts to abuse differently. Neglect is negligent treatment or maltreatment of a child by a parent or caregiver who willfully causes or permits the child to be placed in a situation where their health is endangered. An indicator of neglect is a child lacking medical or dental care. This can be a child who is always hungry or sleepy, or the child who is always dirty. When the weather is freezing, they are dressed for summer. When it's 90 degrees outside, they are playing in heavy jackets and snow boots. There is evidence of poor supervision or conditions in the home that are extremely unsafe or unsanitary and may persist. All the food in the refrigerator is spoiled. None of the toilets in the home work.
Sexual abuse is exposure to sexual stimuli inappropriate for the child's age level, psychological development, or role in the family. It encompasses a broad spectrum of acts of sexual assault and sexual exploitation of children. These acts may have occurred over a long period of time.
The Child Abuse Registry should be called any time that a child reports sexual activity. The child often discloses this information to a person that they trust.
Another indicator of sexual abuse is when a child has a detailed understanding of sexual behavior beyond their years. A 3-year-old should not know about sexual intercourse. Incest, sexual relations between a child and a parent, grandparent, brother, sister, or other relative must be reported to the Child Abuse Registry. This includes any inappropriate touching or fondling or unwanted advances.
Any act that scars and incapacitates a child emotionally, behaviorally, or intellectually is emotional abuse. Such acts may include verbal assaults, belittling, screaming, threats, blaming, and sarcasm, subjecting the child to continual negative moods and double message communication.
I'm going to Vegas this weekend.
A child living within a family with constant fighting and unpredictable responses is a child suffering emotional abuse.
What indicators of emotional abuse do we see in children? Disturbances in sleep, eating, toilet training, and interpersonal behaviors. Severe withdrawal, regression, bizarre behavior, dangerous acting out behavior, or a drastic decline in grades at school can all be clues that a child is being subjected to emotional abuse. Let's talk about making reports to the Child Abuse Registry and your reporting responsibilities.
The Child Abuse Registry is the point of entry for all families receiving child welfare services in Orange County, California. It was established in 1975 to maintain a coordinated, centralized registry where reports of suspected child abuse, child neglect, and child exploitation would be kept and responded to when warranted. The purpose has been to protect children from abuse.
You have an ethical responsibility to protect the most vulnerable population, our children and infants.
Mandated reporters are persons whose job brings them into direct, or in some cases indirect, contact with children. Mandated reporters must call, write, or fax a report to the Child Abuse Registry for any situation where child abuse or child neglect is suspected. Some examples of mandated reporters are medical practitioners, therapists, public school employees, social workers, daycare personnel, religious practitioners, foster parents, persons who monitor child visitation, camp counselors. If your job brings you into contact with children, you have a legal duty to report. Volunteers are not considered mandated reporters, although we would hope you would feel a moral obligation to report. Persons who are not mandated reporters do not have to disclose their name and may report anonymously.
It is a crime for certain professionals and laypersons who have a special working relationship or contact with children not to report suspected abuse.
Any mandated reporter who fails to report an instance of child abuse which he or she knows to exist, or that any reasonable person would suspect to exist, is guilty of a misdemeanor and is punishable by confinement in the county jail for a term not to exceed 6 months and/or a fine of not more than $1,000.
Okay, you're probably thinking, I understand if I see something obvious, like a parent striking a child across the face several times, but what is suspected child abuse?
Tommy's a great kid. We really enjoy having him here at the after-school care program.
Yeah? Well, that's what you see here. Believe me, he's not a great kid at home sometimes. Like last night, he's working on this art project without any newspaper or anything underneath it like he knows he's supposed to have. Spilled paint all over the kitchen table, never even told us.
Man, that must have been a huge mess to clean up.
You have no idea, but he won't make a mess like that again. I gave him a whipping just like my daddy gave me. Good enough to leave some welts, that way he knows not to do it again.
Did the recreational counselor see the abuse occur? No. But would any reasonable person suspect that abuse did occur based on what was just said? Yes. Should a report to the Child Abuse Registry be made? Yes.
A mandated reporter must call the Child Abuse Registry within 24 hours and submit a written report within 36 hours. Reporters are provided immunity from civil and criminal liability as a result of making a required report of suspected child abuse. The identity of all reporting parties will be kept confidential.
You should call in all reports immediately or as soon as possible. The written report is due within 36 hours of when you first knew about the incident you reported. A report needs to be made even in those tragic situations where a child has died.
The Child Abuse Registry accepts and evaluates all reports of suspected child abuse, neglect, or exploitation which meet the legal definition of child abuse. Reporting parties also receive case consultation, referral, and information services. Child abuse reports are distributed to local and state law enforcement agencies for cross-reporting. All reports are evaluated by the Child Abuse Registry in terms of the age of the child, severity of injuries, prior history of abuse, neglect or exploitation, the reporting party's credibility, the abuser's accessibility to the child, and other nuances and dynamics specific to individual cases.
The social worker also uses the structured decision-making assessment tool in deciding what the response to the child abuse report will be.
The options are immediate response, response within 10 calendar days, report assessed and no response required, there is insufficient information to warrant a response. A social worker from the county's emergency response program will see the family and child to assess and investigate the situation. The intervention is immediate when the child abuse report indicates imminent danger to the child exists. The emergency response social worker will also assess and investigate within 10 calendar days or less those situations which were determined to need a visit to the child and family.
Now you know what constitutes child abuse, suspected child abuse, and your responsibilities as a mandated reporter. But what isn't child abuse? What kinds of situations are those you would not report to the Child Abuse Registry?
Injuries caused by two children fighting by mutual consent is not child abuse. Pregnancy of a minor, regardless of her age, does not in and of itself constitute the basis of a reasonable suspicion of sexual abuse.
What about those situations where it is alleged that sexual activity is occurring or has occurred between kids under the age of 18, or if one of the persons is over 18? You are not mandated to report on voluntary sexual activity if there are no other factors indicating child abuse. But you can contact the Child Abuse Registry to consult with the senior social worker. Let's look at other situations where a child abuse report is not required. How about voluntary sexual conduct between children who are both under the age of 14 and who are of a similar age? Not reportable under the Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act.
The purpose of laws relating to sexual abuse of children is to protect sexually naive children from exploitation by adults or older children. What about situations where a mother has used drugs and tests positive for drugs when the baby is born? A positive toxicology screen at the time of delivery is not in and of itself a sufficient basis for reporting child abuse or neglect to law enforcement agencies per Penal Code 1165.13. However, any indication of maternal substance abuse requires an assessment of the needs of the mother and child pursuant to Section 10901 of the Health and Safety Code. And a report may be made to the Child Abuse Registry where the parent's drug use impairs the parent's ability to provide the child with regular care. If there are other factors present that indicate a risk to a child, a report must be made. Sudden infant death syndrome, commonly known as SIDS, is not caused by child abuse and is not reported to the Child Abuse Registry.
An adult tells you they were abused when they were a child. Are you mandated to report that? No. There is no obligation for a mandated reporter to make a report. But what if there are children still in the home or the abusive environment, and the person reporting the information suspects that these children are being abused? Yes, then the reporting party is mandated to report the abuse. If you are presented with this information on the job, you are mandated to report it.
Injuries to a youth caused by reasonable and necessary force used by a peace officer to stop a disturbance threatening physical injury to someone or damage to property is not child abuse. Neither is the use of reasonable force for the purpose of self-defense or to obtain possession of weapons or other dangerous objects within control of a child.
Let's review the child abuse reporting process.
If a child needs immediate protection, call the police, then call the Child Abuse Registry at 714-940-1000, or fax a report to the Child Abuse Registry at 714-938-0289. Complete the suspected child abuse form and mail it to the address on the form within 36 hours.
If the child is not in immediate danger, don't call the police, but do follow the steps on calling or faxing the Child Abuse Registry and mail in the completed form within 36 hours. But what if you're not sure if the incident constitutes child abuse?
Call the Child Abuse Registry to consult. What is the maximum amount of time you have to submit the form to the registry if you are advised to make a written report? That's right, within 36 hours. And if you consult and are told the incident is not reportable, write down the social worker's name on the report form and keep it in your files. Sometimes repeated incidences may result in some type of intervention, depending on the circumstances.
I was kind of scared when the social worker came to my house, but it turned out to be a good thing. My dad is nicer now. He's learning not to hit me or my mom. We go see a counselor person and stuff. After every time we see the counselor, we get to go to McDonald's.
I'm glad I told Mr. Ramos at the after-school program because the social workers came to our house. You know what my mommy did? She made the bad man move out.